Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is my first actual guest of 2023. Very excited for today. And her name, she's author MEG GEISEWITE. She has an upcoming book release. I'm trying to fade this music out. Technical difficulties. There it goes. Ooh, a little bit rusty. It's been a couple weeks since I've done a couple podcast episode.
MEG. Breaking back in.
Yeah, exactly. MEG, happy New Year and welcome to the show. How are you today?
Happy New Year. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. And this is my first podcast as well for the new year. So I'm excited to kick off 2023 with you.
Wonderful. Yes. Yeah. I was looking forward to this one. You reached out, obviously mentioned about your book, your upcoming release, Intoxicating Lies. So we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about your personal journey through sobriety recovery, how you're maintaining that. But one of the reasons is this book. But before we get into that, I would love to hear a little bit about your story and get to know you a little bit more. So we'll give you that opportunity. And aside from that, let's get into it. So you're currently in Delaware right now. And I'd just love to hear, are you born and raised there? What was your origin story and your relationship with alcohol?
It's a great question. Thanks. So yes, I was born and raised in Delaware. However, my dad, his job actually had us move quite a bit growing up. And my birthday is in September. So it was the beginning of the school year. So fitting in was always tough for me because I was typically in a new school. We lived primarily in Delaware, but growing up, I moved quite a bit. We lived in Ohio, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. So really my earliest memories with alcohol start with my parents who ran in the country club scene, and no fault of their own, but that scene was really about outward appearances, connecting through a lot of alcohol at cocktail parties. Either my parents were going to a cocktail party or we were having a cocktail party. And so my mom would dress me up in my best Jessica McClintock dress and have me serve hors d'oeuvres to our guests. And so I learned early on, this is how we connect, is with drinks and people pleasing. I was serving these hors d'oeuvres and that was really early on for me. And again, no fault of my parents. It was, it's an old conditioned belief and kind of circle that they ran in. But then what happened to me was in 5th grade, I actually had an incident with where my mom took me to a psychiatrist to get my IQ tested. And this was something that whole scene did, and she was very well respected within the community, and it was just kind of a rite of passage within the small town of Delaware, in Wilmington, Delaware, where my parents lived at the time. And as she was adding up my score, she had me draw a picture. Now, I loved art and I loved to draw. And when I was done drawing, she said to me in so many words, "It's a good thing that you can draw because your score was really low and you're not going to amount to much." Now, most people say this psychiatrist should have lost her license, but you can imagine I'm a naive 5th grader. She's the expert. She's well known within the community. She's highly respected and regarded. And so I took her comments as, I probably am not going to amount to much. And so very early on, I kind of had this swirling thought of not being very smart or good enough. And then in 8th grade, I started a new school, and I, again, was very important to me to be socially accepted. So the popular girls asked if they could raid my parents' liquor cabinet. So we got the peach schnapps out, and I did shots to be cool, to socially fit in. And this is 8th grade. And it really was, again, this social lubricant and social way for me that I viewed of how to fit in and how to be accepted. I had my very first hangover. It was horrible. And high school just was kind of those binge drinking episodes and high school parties whenever we could get to a high school party and do such, but it wasn't a regular drinking thing for me. Unfortunately, my freshman year of high school, I learned the very hard lesson about drinking and driving. I lost my best friend in a drinking and driving accident, and I should have been in that car. I had fallen asleep on my bed thinking of a lie to tell my parents because I wasn't allowed to go to parties. And I fell asleep on the bed and woke up to horrific news of the girls that I should have been with all jumping into a car because the police came, broke up this enormous party. Everybody ran through the woods and got into a car with a girl who had been drinking an excessive amount. And her name was Carla. She was beautiful soul inside and out, and just lost her at a very, very young age. It was the first loss. I hadn't had a grandparent pass or anything. So it was very impactful for me. I made a promise to never drink and drive, became president of Students Against Drunk Driving in high school. However, even though that message of not drinking and driving, there really weren't any other messages or warnings about the dangers of alcohol. It was don't drink and drive, don't drink if you're pregnant. And that was about it. And so I went into college with the same kind of mindset that this is how I socially fit in and be accepted at these parties. And my freshman year of college, I was at a party drinking the keg beer and buzzing on the keg beer in the basement of some fraternity house. And a young man who was a rugby player, really charming, good-looking guy, started talking to me. It was very loud and noisy in the party. So he asked me if we could go outside to talk. And I didn't think much of it. So I followed him outside. He led me behind a bush and he attacked me. And I thought I was going to be raped behind that bush. I really had a fear instilled in me that day that I had never had before. I could not move my entire body. He had my entire body pinned down. And so after that incident, I blamed myself that I had drank too much. How could someone do this to somebody else? It's like, you can't even wrap your head around it. It's so illogical. And so you start to think that it's your fault or that you have done something wrong, even though we know it's not. But at a young age, without much, education around that, I blamed myself. And I started to go into an over-functioning because I had no control over my body, trying to control everything around me. I joined every extracurricular activity. I graduated cum laude because, again, I wanted to prove that I was enough. I still had that swirling message that I was not enough. Now I've had somebody take away and make me feel kind of not enough. And so that propelled me into an over-functioning coping mechanism of trying to control everything around me. After college, I still continued to drink in that binge setting where it was only on the weekends with friends out at bars, and got myself, you would think I would have learned, but got myself into a situation with a guy I was dating. Now, it was fairly early on in the relationship, but I was out with him one night, heavily drinking, and was date raped that evening. And that second incident really made me feel like damaged goods. Really, I had the second time it happened, it hit me harder than the first. Now, the first was just an assault, but the second was a rape. And so that lack of control was there again, right? Not having any control. And after college, I fell into sales, and really because that swirling, I'm damaged goods, I'm not good enough, and the need to control, I fell into that hustle culture that I needed to prove my worth, that my sales rankings and what I sold equated to being enough, and that I am what I produce. I fell then into sales in the aesthetic industry. So now I am swirling with that I need to look perfect while I'm doing this and selling the image of beauty products. and as well as in a sales culture that is a heavy drinking culture where you are rewarded with trips that include all of the alcohol you can drink, you know, meetings after meetings where it's not only encouraged to go to the bar, but if you don't, it's frowned upon.
Right.
You're not fitting into the so-called work culture. So I'm doing the hustle culture, the beauty culture, the work, you know, drinking culture. And it was still just kind of on at work functions or on the weekends. And I ended up meeting my husband in the industry, got married. We had 2 kids, and I fell into the mommy wine culture, which was, you know, I was really in this rat race of my sales, my worth, trying to control everything, look like I had it all. And I was exhausted taking care of the kids, running around for work, and then taking care of the home. So I was putting everybody's needs before my own and being told on a tea towel or a t-shirt that behind every great mom is a bottle of wine. And if your kids whine, mommy whines, gets her wine. And I used to think it was funny. It normalized my behavior. So I bought into all of it. I gulped it down unknowingly and would post on my Instagram about, you know, if I go missing, look for my face on a wine bottle. Like, I was heavily entrenched into the messaging that big alcohol is setting to women in particular. We're exhausted, we're tired. The mental chatter that was going on in my brain, the only thing that would shut it off was that glass of wine. You know, after I would put the kids down, I would rush them to bed so that I could have that rewarding glass of wine. And that's the first lie I talk about in my book is I deserve a glass of wine. I've earned it. It's my reward. And so what ended up happening was I had 3 back-to-back life events happened. My husband lost his job. We lost our best friend unexpectedly. This was all 2 weeks apart. And a loved one, a friend of mine came forward and had confided in me that she was sexually molested when she was younger and she was ready to get justice. Would I be her safe person to walk that journey with her? So I did, which was very, very dark. And it brought up all of my past sexual assault things that I kind of thought I had dealt with in some therapy, talk therapy, but realized I had not really dealt with it with a trauma-informed life coach. It was still in my body. It was still trapped in there. And because these 3 back-to-back life events were so intense, I became the primary sole income maker for our family. My dear friend, you know, was a single mom and lost her husband unexpectedly. And I was navigating that path with her. And then this loved one coming through and dealing with her sexual assault and mine catapulted me from this recreational use with alcohol to really a medicinal use of using it every single night. Because I just didn't have the earth school or the techniques or the healthy ways of coping my nervous system. I was crying most evenings. And so I drowned it all out in a glass of wine. And what ended up happening is everybody got better. Everybody got their lives back together. But now I was stuck with this habitual wine habit. And I was justifying it really with anything that happened in the day, like that number one lie, I deserve this. It could have been that there was a long line at the grocery store. You know, it was like any justification for my nightly wine habit, I kept it going. So I started suffering pretty internally and went to my therapist, who I was realizing that these sexual assaults needed to be dealt with. But she was not a trauma informed. We were just doing talk therapy. And I'll tell you here in a minute why that is very different than trauma informed therapists. But anyways, so I went to her and said, you know, I think I have a drinking problem. And I explained to her the back and forth tug of war in my head that I always would say in the morning, I'm not going to do this again. You know, I would wake up in that slight gray fog, eat healthy all day, do a strenuous workout to prove that I was in control. I mean, I would bike 20, 30 miles and be like, see, I don't have a problem. I just biked all these miles. I'm fine. And then when the sun would flip and the kids were in bed, it was like that craving came on so profoundly that I would just say, oh, I'm just going to have one. And it was rarely ever one. And so she said to me, no, I think you're just thinking about it too much. So her ill advice kept my gray area of drinking in motion for 2 more years. Because again, just like the lady when I was in 5th grade, she's the expert. I'm listening to her. And so this is where things really started to shift for me. My inner knowing started pleading with me to explore my relationship with alcohol. My inner knowing was saying, this is not serving us. You're not being the best version of yourself. This is killing your mind, body, and spirit. Please explore this. I mean, I Googled so many times, do I have a drinking problem? I think, you know, my computer was convinced I did. So, you know, it just, my point is, we can go to fitness and wellness exercise classes and they'll talk about sweating out the toxins or serve champagne after the yoga. It adds to our confusion with gray area drinking. It tells us that, you know, this is a reward after a hard workout. It further ingrains what we're doing is okay and normalizes it. And they're the wellness experts. Here's a therapist who's telling me it's okay. I mean, I can't tell you how many of my friends have said, their doctors have said, you know, your nightly wine is fine.
Yeah.
And so my point is, I don't care who the expert may be. If your mind, body, and spirit, your inner knowing is telling you differently or sending up alarms, listen to her, because I am so grateful that I finally listened to my inner knowing. And I saw an ad for Sober Sis, which she described the detox to retox loop, which was like, oh my God, that is exactly how I feel. I just figured everybody around me drank like me, so it was my problem. I suffered very silently. When I would ask people, do you think I drink too much? They would say, no, you drink just like I do. And we were highly successful businesswomen, you know, lawyers and doctors and nurses, and I'm in pharmaceutical sales. And so we were all achieving and winning awards at work and doing really well. But, and this is how my book opens, you know, but we look like we had our, you know, shit together, but did we really? Because we were finding condolence in our gray area drinking that makes it look normal when everybody else around you is doing it, just like you. And so that's where I want to come in and just say to your listeners that, you know, it may look normal. People may tell you it's normal. The wellness experts, the health experts, what really matters is how and what is it providing for you, and listening to that small inner voice that's telling you otherwise. When I no longer wanted my kids to do sports in the evenings, that scared me, because I wanted to come home to my rewarding glass of wine. And then I realized this is now in control of me. Here I am wanting to control everything in my life and believing that I was in control of my alcohol consumption. But it had shifted, right? Because I no longer wanted my kids to do sports so that I could come home and have that rewarding glass of wine. And that scared me. And so that is when I decided to join Jen Couch's Sober Sis 21-day reset. I had no desire to quit alcohol. I just felt like, oh, I'll do what everybody else does in this instant gratification society. Join this 30-day challenge or 21-day challenge and fix it in 21 days. You know, like that's the mindset I went in. I just need a few tools to get back into like everybody else. I figured I had lost my way. It was my issue. And I thought, oh, probably be me and 3 other women in this group. And I got in there and there were hundreds of women. And I thought, why are there so many women in here? What is going on? And I just stayed curious. Through her 21-day reset, we read Annie Grace's This Naked Nine. After I was done her 21-day reset, was sleeping better. My eczema had cleared up. I'd never felt better. That fog that I was in all day, working that slight hangover, was gone. Things were starting to come back into color. And I thought, I don't know what this is all about or how long I want to do this, but I want to explore this a little more. So I did Annie Grace's alcohol experiment for 30 days. And then Jen had created a alcohol-free lifestyle program, which was 90 days. And I said, you know what? I am going to give my body 100 days to see what it feels like at 100 days. And because this feels so good and I'm so curious about this, let's give it a little more time. Now, during that time, because I sell on science, right? I sell to physicians. I was really starting to dig into the science. And when I realized all the truths about alcohol, I was like, how come we're not told this on the bottle? How come there's no warnings about this? And I became more curious. I was journaling every day, asking myself, what is this giving me? Why am I doing this? Why is everybody else doing it? And I just stayed curious. At 100 days, something really shifted in my brain. It was like, I couldn't find any reasons to go back. It was like, this is a forever thing, I think, for me. So that's really kind of my drinking story. I know it's a long one, but no, that's kind of how it all came to fruition.
That's wonderful. Yeah. Thanks for being so honest. Thanks for sharing all of that. It's a incredibly relatable story. Like that's what I like about having people on the show is there's often broad stroke elements that are very similar. Like I can hear parts of my story and your story. And then there's like your own personal experience and the nuance that comes along with it that makes it your story, Yeah. So that's what I love about, talking with people in sobriety and recovery is just instantly there's like the vulnerability, the honest share, which is just always incredible. So again, thank you for that. And then, yes, there's different elements that are just like, oh, wow, like this is, and to your point, it's like you're piecing it together. You're seeing it in the people around you, the external around you, and you're starting to go, wow, like, and I'm talking to people and they're having the same drinking experience. And then that just facilitates further for you to continue on with those patterns because nobody's telling each other there's anything wrong.
Right.
The normalization through like humor, the cute, mommy wine culture, the jokes and such that you mentioned. So, man, there's so much there. The first thing that really stands out to me, like the burning question for me is that you have these people in your life that were supporting you essentially, if for no other reason, because they didn't want to project their own drinking problem on you or vice versa, or have that reflected back to them. What has been their reaction? Has your circle of influence changed at all? And have you influenced it for the better, or have you had people fall out? That's always a big sort of point of fear I found with people is, oh, do I have to like find a new circle of friends and all that? So yeah, how has that been for you? That was the first thing.
That's a really good question because it's another lie. It's another chapter in my book. My biggest fear in becoming alcohol free was that I would be boring and that I would lose friends. And so, quick story, and that's in the book. My very first holidays, big party at my house, set up a non-alcoholic bar and set up a bar. I didn't have a problem being around alcohol. I know that can be triggering for a lot, but for me, I didn't have a temptation to get into it. I was using the non-alcoholic beverages. Again, I know it's a personal decision, but for me, I was able to kind of surf the crave with a non-alcoholic beverage. So I had my drinks, I had the decorations, I had the food set up, and one of the guests at my party, it was socially awkward for me. For the first time everything when you go through those firsts feels uncomfortable. The
Mhm.
silence feels longer. It feels huge, like the elephant in the room. And I was sitting with it for the very first time at my own dining room table. And
Mm.
this guest said to me, and my sister had quit drinking too. She said, "You two are so boring." And it was like a knife went through my heart. And I went outside, I took the trash out, and I took several deep breaths, and I thought this would be the perfect time to have a drink. Like, I was probably at that point 30 to 60 days. I can't remember. I think it was
Yeah.
like about 60 days, maybe somewhere in between there, about 50 days sober. And so this is where community is so important. I jumped on the Sober Sis community. She has it's called Marco Polo. It's an app where it's a video app. You can go back and forth and talk to each other. And I got on there and I said, "Girls, I'm having a moment. My
Mm.
greatest fear was just now said to me." And they said, "This has more to do with her fear of quitting drinking. She is projecting her fear onto you. This has more to say about her own drinking." And I was like, "Oh my God, you're right." And they were like, "You can do this. You don't have to drink. We're here for you. You can," and it was like that encouragement and that support around me that I needed when I was like staring at my greatest fear so early on in my journey. And um, this guest did apologize later and has actually adjusted her drinking since then.
Oh,
So
okay.
you just never know when you're kind of planting a seed of being a different way. And you're showing up differently to the people who have known you a certain way for decades.
Yes.
And it takes time. You have to have compassion for them too, because they are learning your new way and how you're showing up differently. And so instead of being hurt and angry, I saw the compassion, with that this really had to do more with her own drinking behavior and thoughts, and old conditioned belief that we've all had ingrained in us, that this is the way you have fun. And I started to find other ways of having fun. And for me, it was to go back to what brought me alive when I was a little girl. I loved to paint. I loved to be in nature. And so I really encourage anybody who's early on in their journey, go back and journal what brought you joy when you were a little kid. I love to ride my bike. So I started getting into biking. I love being outside. It's like my spirit would come alive. I would be
Mm.
singing. I had a playlist,
Mm.
of encouraging strong women on my playlist, telling me to not give up, to keep going. And it was that natural endorphins. I started doing, I talk about it in the book. It's called a Swelty Day, which is
Mm.
see where life takes you day. So my
Ah,
friend
cool.
and I got up. You have no plans. You don't
Mm.
know where you're going to go. You don't know what you're going to do. You
Mm.
just see where life takes you. And when you're not hungover and you're not feeling like crap, it's a lot of fun to actually do with yourself, with your friend, with your children, with your spouse. And we went to a little airplane museum. We weren't even sure if it would be open. We ended up, taking a tour of 3 different hangars, going to this little town, getting lost on the way there, but finding this great little town and this great little pizza place and walking around. And we just let life take us wherever we wanted. And we ended up having so much fun. And to me, those things are fun and more important than what I thought was fun.
Yeah.
I'm an empath and a highly sensitive person. I thought I liked parties.
Mm.
What I have realized is that alcohol numbed the loud noises and all the energy coming at me, and
Yeah.
really just allowed me to what's the word I'm looking for? Endure it, like get
Right.
through it, really, because honestly, as an empath and a highly sensitive person, now I find that when I'm in these situations without alcohol, I have to remove myself sometimes
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
not stay as long, because that all that loud noise and all that stuff coming at me, it zaps me very quickly. And alcohol was a way of numbing all that.
Interesting, this whole journey though, the things you find out and how it unravels and unthaws as you go, right? So I'm loving how you're sharing, some of the things that are helping you do this healing. And I love the story about just using different things for that first 100 days and just staying curious. I'm hearing that the curiosity, overwhelming curiosity became such a like a value of yours, right? As soon as you're sort of sobering up. Another thing that stood out to me, and I really want to riff on this a little bit too, is the difference between hearing something external that you granted it, and you had that story from being young and hearing you're never going to amount to something. So, and the fact that you're an empath and so forth, you are sensitive. So when you are getting these external reflections or things coming your way, and it was to the stage that you were overriding your own intuition for a very, very long time.
Yes.
And that was sort of a late bloom for you as well. And I imagine that went hand in hand with the sobriety. So I want to get your take on it too, and any sort of advice that you can give on just listening to your intuition and what that means, and how do you continue to cultivate that? I imagine it really ties in with that the days where let's see where life takes you days. I imagine that's a great way of integrating and practicing that, right?
Yes, yes, yes. So I was always looking outside of myself for validation and worth, and, just constantly going outside of myself for validation is all I can say. And so learning that to truly regulate my nervous system meant slowing down. I had learned that I had become dutiful yet dead in therapy. I was taking care of everybody around me and not myself. So healing for me looked like getting up in the morning and putting myself first with the journaling, movement. It was a way of me to process my feelings. No longer were workouts to prove I was in control of my drinking. Workouts were a way to process my feelings, to get a natural dopamine hit, a way of enjoying it. Like I look forward to it now. The other thing I do is I'm such a big believer in being outside with nature. I feel like nature is our greatest teacher. And we need to slow down to the pace of nature, right? That's a famous quote. But when I go on my walks and I'm processing my emotions, I get so excited because I have this thing, and if you follow me on Instagram, I post it not every day, but most days. It's called Find the Beauty in the Day. So today, when I went on my walk, I found a heart that was it was water in the pavement. And then a little bit later on my walk, I found a heart-shaped leaf. It can be a sunset, it can be a bird, it can be a rock. And I collect heart rocks. So I'm always kind of looking for hearts because I believe love wins. But I get excited for the magic of what the universe is going to show me on my walks. And I believe it's these signs, whether they're an animal or the heart, are saying to me, Meg, you are being held and loved through this journey. We're here for you. Find the beauty. And it's the way of having like gratitude in the day and savoring it. And we know that changes the brain. So if you're having a bad day, just spending a little time outside and looking for something that's meaningful to you. It could be a tree. It could be, a leaf, whatever it is. Find the beauty in the day for you. It really changes your mindset and gives you that attitude of gratitude.
Yes.
Yeah. And so the other thing was breath work. I know you're a breath work coach. And so I had never done that before. And letting go of this perfectionism, over functioning, a high achieving people pleaser was popping up quite a bit because now there's not a substance there to numb it. So I write about in my book, again, about nature, a snake sheds her skin 12 times a year. And when we shed our old version of us, we have to look at that old shape of that skin that comes off without judgment, without shame. She was doing the best that she could at the time. But these coping mechanisms come up and it's like catching them more. and then releasing them through breath work, meditation, journaling, movement. It's how do I take what's coming up for me from my past and view it with compassion and self-love and self-acceptance. And not, that's the other thing we do so much in our society, is we beat ourselves up so much. You know, it's these stories that we tell ourselves, and they're not true. And that's the other thing in my book, is just the lies that we tell ourselves. I grew up with that lie from these incidences that happened to us, that I'm not smart enough, that I'm not good enough, you know. And unfortunately, they sometimes take hold in our psyche very young, and we don't realize that we're doing perfectionism, overachieving, people pleasing in order to cope with that story. And so through breath work, oh my gosh, I was able to not only like feel this amazing amount of energy flowing through my body that felt like a natural high. I was like, God, I can't believe I ever drank. This is amazing.
Yeah.
To literally bawling my eyes out in the process, and just shedding, like I said, shedding and letting go of this older version of me, not with shame and guilt. Like I said, just looking at it like she did the best that she could. And now I get to choose again and show up for myself in a better way, because I know better and I can do better. But it's a constant trying to regulate your nervous system with these healthy ways. We're just not taught it.
Right.
So,
100%.
you know,
yeah.
I feel bad when people think that like they have all this shame around their drinking. It's not your fault. You know, you've been taught that this is how you deal with challenges. I mean, the pandemic, drinking went up 42% in women, particularly, are trying to juggle homeschooling, their jobs, the house, you know, and then we're told have a quarantini to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know? And what we're not told is that breath work and slowing down to listen to our inner knowing. It was really when I took this course and we had to meditate for 10 to 15 minutes every day. And I thought, can I sit
Yeah.
minutes with my monkey mind?
Of course, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Each day it got a little easier, and each day more of my inner knowing, and the answers are all within us, would show up. That intuition is there. You just got to dust her off. Right?
Well put. Very well put. Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. Everything you're saying is just so resonating with me. And there's a lot of, especially the healing aspect of it, of the journey. Yeah, I'm very much connected with you, lockstep, in a lot of these different things, the nature, the intelligence of nature. I hadn't actually heard that quote. I wrote it down, slow down to the pace of nature. I love that. Yeah, that was a big thing for me this last year, especially like when I felt myself, because I have that similar, you know, need to achieve. And I'm realizing that was a pattern because of what you had mentioned as well, similar as far as like not being enough without this achievement, or I was sort of outrunning this feeling, and to be able to realize that. So what I would do is when I had that feeling of like urgency, I have to get this done, I'm like, or I can go lay outside and watch the clouds for 15 minutes and just do the exact opposite of what this side of me is telling that I have to do. And my goodness, it was just a great way to really flip the script, so to speak, on that whole pattern that I had. And also being there for the pattern, I really like, and it's very important that what you mentioned, I stopped judging that. I stopped having shame, because that's just like the second layer of unneeded anguish that I'm putting myself through by adding some shame onto this already. All it needs, all that feeling inside of me needed, was some acceptance and unconditional love. So to allow it. And I love that, again, the analogy of the snake skin and so forth, shed it and not judge it. Just look at it. Okay, this was me at one point. This is where I was with it. Observe, learn, love it, and move on, and so forth. So just really, yeah, loving everything that we're talking about today, Meg. So great stuff. I have actually a question for you now. What is your relationship with, because certainly, but this is a great segue to get into the actual book and the creative process.
Yeah.
You know, writing a book is a huge accomplishment. So congratulations. So certainly there is some of that pattern, that old pattern of achievement and, you know, high performance that remains. What is your relationship with that nowadays, and how did that loan itself into the book, and how were you able to regulate it with going, okay, Am I putting too much pressure on myself? Like, what did that look like for you, that whole aspect of your
Well, it's
personality?
such a big question and good one, because the book journey in and of itself was a whole nother cathartic journey for me. I had people telling me, you should take this entire chapter out. You should say this. Why are you being so vulnerable about your sexual assaults? You know, I got a lot of people questioning who I was. And the book really taught me the truth of who I am, and that I am enough. Just like you said, I don't have to do more. I am inherently enough. I'm already more than enough. And that book literally took me through, like, at first there were times of, how many do I print up, and how many am I going to sell, and how many followers do you have, and all the things that society tells you is a success. And my mission with this book has always been to help one woman. If I help one woman free herself from the mommy wine culture, or from gray area drinking, or if that she's not enough, then the book has done its job. And the book was so cathartic for me that I felt like even if it wasn't a success, it healed me. And so it took me through letting go of all that overachieving and chronic people pleasing, like you're talking about. There were times when I've had some people tell me, you should do this and you should do that. I hate the word should.
I'm with you on that.
Oh, and of course, yes, I could do those things, but I always went back into my body. Did I want to do this? Did it bring me joy? Is it fulfilling and feeding my soul, or is it something I should do because everybody else who's launching a book is doing it, right?
100%.
So I had to let go of a lot of the shoulds and do what felt right to me. I will tell you, I got a testimonial from a woman who tore out the first page, because you can get a copy signed now from me.
Yes.
And I wrote in there, may you always know the truth that you are already more than enough. And she said she ripped it out and she taped it to the front page of her journal, and she reads it every day. And that I gave her the permission slip to know that she is more than enough and to begin this healing process. To me, that was like, the book did its job. It was almost like, okay, well, if nobody else done, mission accomplished.
Oh, that's amazing. What an amazing story. Oh, that's so cool. So let's get into it a little bit. And before we get into, I'm always interested in creative process. Like if you have a writing routine and such. I have a really great friend who's also a client of mine who's just starting her book journey as well. So I'm definitely going to send this episode over to her. So let's get into it. Like, so I'm curious, when you're writing the book, did you give yourself like a countdown of days? Like, okay, in 6 months, did you have like certain routine? Like, okay, I'm going to get up at 6 a.m. because I'm the most creative at 6 a.m. What are some of the nuts and bolts of your creative process? I'm curious.
So I actually found that I was never a morning person when I was drinking. Those mornings were always like the hardest, right? It was always starting the day at a deficit. Now I've got all this energy. I have my coffee and I love to journal. Ever since I was a little girl, I love to journal. And so I have an intention journal now that I write in every day, my intentions, and kind of sets the tone for the day. But when I was in this sober curious journey, I was journaling every day, processing all the feelings that were coming up, all the questions I was asking, what I wanted. And I took a course called Find Your Voice with Ali Fallon. And after I took that course, I reached out to her and I said, I have 32,000 words written. And she said, oh my God, that's like half of a book. So you need a content editor. So I got a content editor, Ariel Curry. And it was like she took my lump of clay of thoughts, right? All of my journaling, and helped me break it into this beautiful laid out chapters.
Cool. Yeah.
And I ended up still writing while I was with her. I don't believe in absolute perfectionism or absolute, like, you have to write 10,000 a day, words a day.
Gotcha. Yeah.
For me, what would happen is when I was on my bike rides or my walks outside, I call them downloads. I would get
Mm.
downloads literally of just all of this information would come in. And so when I was done my bike ride or if I was walking, I would go into the notes on my phone and I would just start pouring everything that downloaded out. And then I would write, whenever I could, because I'm a busy mom. It would be, mornings were always best. Yes, that's when I was most creative. However, again, I don't believe in absolute perfection. If the kids, I was at sports and I had some extra time to do some writing while I'm sitting there waiting for them, take advantage of that, half an hour in the car or whatever. I mean, I would
Yeah.
just do it whenever I could. I
Mm.
never really kept to a rigid, outline of when it had to happen. But Ariel was just so instrumental in taking all of those thoughts and creating this beautiful book that's right here.
Yes. Isn't that a wonderful? So you have a bit of like, it sounds like you have some people on your team now. You had somebody do a website design for you. Your upcoming launches the week of January 17th. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Yes.
as far as, yeah. So you're getting on some interviews right now, which is wonderful. Really, absolutely honored that you came on today to share this with us. And yeah, just I love what you're doing with this. And it sounds like it was, I'd say like a byproduct of you living your life of this. Okay, let's see where, following your intuition. And as a byproduct of that, you are meeting people that are content editor at the right place at the right time, right? All of a sudden it's just like, let's make a book. So then it's just naturally, organically fell into place. Here you are sitting with it behind you on a shelf, ready to release. So isn't that an amazing process for you? And like he's mentioned, I always think of the word cathartic. You've gotten it out now. So do you feel lighter? Like, do you feel physically lighter from having this book out there? Yeah. Like, what has it been like? And actually, let's be really specific about it. What was it like to get those boxes of the book shipped to your house, opening it? I saw it on Instagram. You had the copy, held up. What did that feel like? What was that like for
Oh,
you?
it was so surreal. So God really laid this book on my heart years ago, but when I was drinking, that creative part of you, I believe, is just cut off. You're cut off to your intuition. It's almost like this corroded, connection that's just corroded from
Yeah.
alcohol.
Right.
You can't lean into that intuition and you can't lean into that creativity when you're kind of fogged out all the time or checked out. It's just doesn't happen. And so, I think a lot of people will find that when they give up alcohol, if they love to write or they love to paint or they love to sew or whatever it is, it will come flowing out of you because it's something that you love to do. You always have. It's always been in you. And it's like this. I talk about it in the book. We all have these rare gems, which is our inner knowing inside of us. It's just we have dusts and layers of earth of conditioning and cultural beliefs and limiting beliefs, and it's all there. It's all within us. We just have to dust it all off. And I really believe that the universe showed up with the right people at the right time. Ariel happened to be in Allie Fallon's course in my breakout room. I mean, like, what are the
Wow.
chances,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it
Meant to
really
be.
was all these empowering women around me that came in and said, you can do this. Now, the other thing I'd like to say is that there were so many times where I was like, I have never written a book. I didn't go to school for, I was a communication major, but I was not an English teacher or anything like, a writing journalism major. So again, those limiting beliefs and worries would come in
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and say, who are you to write a book? Right. What I would encourage anybody, whatever your dream is to take a baby step that day. So I would say, okay, today I'm going to do these 3 baby steps. I'm going to post something on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to write, X, Y, and Z pages.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to search for a website designer. I would just do
Mm-hmm.
3 little baby steps of the next right thing. Now,
Mm.
I can tell you every time I hit send or would do something outside of my comfort zone, I would literally be shaking. Like,
Oh, wow.
I,
Yeah.
you know, how is this going to be accepted? I mean, really, writing a book is like putting your most vulnerable artwork and story out there for everybody to say, oh, I like this, or I don't like this, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's if
100%.
you open a store, people just don't come if they don't like it. But with a book, you have to hear everybody's reviews, you know.
Right.
And so it's daunting, to say the least. And I think they say like over 80% of people want to write a book but never do, and it's
Oh,
because
wow.
of these fears.
Yes.
And so it's these little micro baby steps that when you look back, it's leaps that you take in the journey. But if you try to do it all at once, it's overwhelming, it's daunting.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I finished writing it, I was like, oh my God, now I have to market it. Like, now I have to get it out there, right? And it
Yeah.
was like
Yeah.
this next thing of like, but what I've learned to do is lean into that uncomfortable, just like we do in the alcohol-free journey, lean
Mm-hmm.
into it and get curious about
Mm-hmm.
it, because I know that in that big energy that's coming through me of fear, and I call it, it's what Glennon Doyle calls skited. It's scary and exciting. Skited.
Yes. Yeah. I love that.
You
Love
know, I
that.
love that, because it's like it's both things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I always say to myself, just buckle in, because expansion and growth are coming from this.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the magic is. And I think that's what life is all about, is finding the magic. So it's like, lean into it just in baby steps, you know, and the magic will show up.
Yes, I love it. Man, you're saying all my favorite words: expansion, growth, like the baby steps, that whole process. Absolutely. And so sometimes it on one hand, it doesn't feel like you want to take these massive steps. And that's where I get in my own head, is like, I want to take these massive, messy actions and so forth. And that sounds romantic and sexy and all that. But when I look back at my process, it is exactly what you say. It was because of those three things that seemed at the time fairly trivial, and they just accumulated. Then all of a sudden I had this, like, it's like investing, right? It's often the least sexy investing. Is like $10 a month. So when you're 18 years old, and all of a sudden you can retire at 50, versus that one person that's like trying to do these violent cryptocurrency whatevers, right? Because yeah, so just really resonating with everything that you said. I really appreciate you coming on today, Meg, and just so much great stuff that we've talked about, and I can definitely see us doing a part 2. I'd love to check in on you further on down the road, after you've done the book release and it's had some time to marinate in the general public and you're starting to get some feedback. I'll definitely do a check-in with you later on. Speaking of, I'd love that as well. Speaking of, one last thing that you mentioned is just some of the like, you putting yourself out there and getting some reviews. What are some of the early reviews? Have you gotten some like critique? Have people done some armchair quarterbacking to the book? What have been the initial reactions to your book?
I mean, so far it's been really positive, and I know that the critics are coming, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm at a place now where I'm fine with that. But it's really been, and I think the words in the reviews that are popping up the most is that it's relatable, and that it's, they can see themselves in the story, and that's why I wrote the book, because at the time, I didn't see a lot of books on gray area drinking. I wanted to explain what that was. I needed a story where, it wasn't kind of hitting a rock bottom. I didn't have any external consequences. So when I would read those things in other books, it kind of kept me trapped. And I'm not throwing shame or judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Every story is so important in this space. We all are on different journeys. But I needed they say you write the book that you need, right? That you wish that you had.
100%.
And so that's why I wrote it, is because I wanted other women in particular, and if I've even had some men read it and say, gosh, it opened my eyes to how much my wife is doing, and I didn't realize
interesting
how she's always putting herself last, and how she's rewarding herself with wine or over functioning. And so, thank you for writing it, because it's helped open my eyes to everything that she's doing. And so while it is geared a little more towards women, I still think that, like you said, there's things in my story that men will relate to as well. So I think it's the relatability to the story, and just, I think most of us are suffering from something, overcoming something that happened in our lives. And so a lot of us are telling ourselves stories that we're not enough. And that this book starts with that and ends with that you are more than enough, and that you are worth, exploring an alcohol-free life and all the beauty and soul providing things it provides on the other side of it.
I love that. We'll put a pin in it with that statement. Beautiful way to finish it off. I do want to give you the chance though, if anybody wants to reach out to you, where can they find your book? They can pre-order it, get an autographed copy perhaps.
Yes.
So yeah, where can we find you online, Meg?
So if you go to intoxicatinglies.com, you can get a personalized signed copy today. I am mailing them out from my inventory here that has arrived to the house. And if you want to order it from a bookstore, everywhere bookstores, everywhere it will be sold, everywhere bookstores will be selling it the week of January 17th. And I live primarily on Instagram, although it's connected to Facebook. So you can find me on Instagram at Intoxicating Lies Book, all one word. And on Facebook, it is the Intoxicating Lies, One Woman's Journey to Freedom from Gray Area Drinking. It's a business page on Facebook. Haven't really gotten into TikTok. It's one of those shoulds that right now.
Yeah, I hear you on that
like
one.
All I can manage is
Yeah.
Instagram and Facebook, but
yeah. That's a whole sorry to jump on you there. That's a whole nother like you talked about, okay, so writing the book, that was job one. Then it's like, oh, the real work begins as far as like the marketing, and then to sustain the marketing and such, social media, and then you realize this is almost at least a part-time job, hopping on there and creating content and interacting with everybody. So yeah, absolutely. I really admire everything you've done with the book, and your message is amazing. It's so important. The further along that society gets with the normalization of sobriety, which is wonderful, right? And recovery, gray area is such a untapped, like you said, there's a lot of stories about these plummeting rock bottom moments, and even that was like people were worried about putting that kind of stuff out there. So your type of story that's really tapping into how unique and nuanced and a trap that gray area drinking can be, and showing that as that's just a great sign of where we are as a sobriety recovery community. And
That's a good
thank
point.
you for thank you for absolutely, thanks for doing the work that you do. Very excited about your book, have high hopes for everything that comes together, and thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate you having me. It was a real joy.
Thank you.